And I am also a staff developer where I conduct professional development workshops for instructors and program directors. I enjoy coaching and working with staff to apply new and creative strategies or methodologies uh, to, to reach the learner, the adult learner. All of us have been adult learners at some point in time. Even right now, we are adult learners, so our learning is not going to stop like that. And today's presentation on scaffolding, even though most instructors are teaching online, at some point in time, when everything gets back to normal, they will be expected to go back into in-person to serve the population that they probably won't able to attract during this online service that we're having now. So, and then in a discussion I had, I think I should share this, because of the dynamics of how things have changed, there's also the question of, should we continue the online learning when we do get back to in-person? That's the question that came to me. My personal view is that yes, it should continue, and I'll tell you why. As an adult educator, a former instructor myself, there are always students who we cannot get to come through our doors. And then there's the group who are willing to walk through the doors of a program for service. And the online platform will capture those who that programs don't usually see coming through their doors, one. And two, those participants who are interested in online and they have the resources, and it's they may lack childcare, but they can have their children in their own space while they try to improve themselves. Why not? It's new. I'm open to change. I'm open to new ideas. So I hope that programs now that through this whole pandemic and what we have to go through in terms of the changes with learning and teaching, that the powers that be, that they sit and discuss and come up with some good strategies so that we can reach our adult learner and reach them effectively. Okay, so with that said, let me go to slide 2. I'll try to share my slide now. Right, good. Are you seeing it? Yes, good. So the objectives for today's session is to look at the zone of proximal learning, the development in scaffolding and its use in lesson planning. We also look at the characteristics of scaffolding, how to make teaching effective using scaffolding, and to use scaffolding to accommodate different learning levels. Okay. Emily, let me ask you a quick question. Is there any way that I can get the emails of my participants so I can forward them?
We have the record on our end, so you can reach out to the conference.
Yes, please do. I would love that. And just the participants, and I'll send them some information. Okay, so in case that is a question for someone, I answered it. All right. So let's look at I'm trying to go. Emily, could you switch to slide 2 for me on your end?
It won't allow me to now, but I may.
No, it's okay. Let me try. Okay, I got it. Awesome. Maybe it's my keys. It's freezing. So just before, let me go back. Just before we do that, Launch, could you, what are we in slide 3? Could you launch the poll question for me? I have 2 simple poll questions there for you. Are you seeing it? Give me a thumbs up if you're seeing it. Awesome. 2 simple poll questions. Just answer it. All right. Thank you for your honesty as an educator. Keep it real. I love it. Keep it real. Yeah. And it's coming in. Beautiful. Yeah. And might I say this here one time? please, I don't want us to be distanced even though we are online. It's a conversation. I always tell my instructors, my providers, and they listen, we having this conversation. We can only grow when we converse and talk to each other. So I don't want to be the one talking alone. Feel free to stop, unmute. They can unmute, right? Emily, ask a question, put it in the chat. Emily is so graceful. Thank you, Emily, in advance. All right. So according to the poll, share the results with them. Yes. Some people say sometimes they do. Yes. Some people said no. Okay. All right. Do you scaffold your lesson? Yes. And some people say sometimes. But I want to believe now, probably you never did think of it, but I think when I start going deeper into the presentation, some things will resonate with you and a little light bulb might go off and you will say, but you know, I do that. So don't worry, it happens to me too. I think that, no, but I know I do that. So yes, thank you very much for sharing. I appreciate it. And let's continue. All right, so stop the poll now. All right, so I could continue. Just X this out. I feel I have too much of Emily. Is it my screen?
I know it has.
I think it's so key. I'm sharing and it's hard to move.
I know it has an animation. An alternative is that I can share my screen.
Yeah, please do. I'll appreciate it.
Okay, just give me one moment.
Because it is good just before sharing, but I noticed that it's not the first time it has happened to me. That I'm pressing it and it's like frozen.
Sure, give me one moment.
So what you could do, Emily, is just you want to keep the host instead of, or you just won't make both of us?
I'm in host, you're in co-host, so we should be okay.
So then could you share it? Could you turn to the next slide?
Sure.
My key is frozen.
Okay, one moment.
Thank you.
Okay. Can everyone see okay?
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Okay, good. So slide 3. Right, good. So scaffolding. Let's start to get into the meat of this thing called scaffolding. So this theory came about back in the 1950s by a psychologist called Jerome Bruner. And he, in his research, he came up with the idea that instructors can best serve students. They can support their students by scaffolding the lesson to bridge the gap. And we'll get into that bridging the gap right after. To bridge the gap, which is the difference between what students have learned and what they are expected to know, and be able to do at a certain point in their learning. Now, I know maybe the participants in this session are ESL instructors or maybe ABHSC instructors, and picture in your mind your students coming to you. And according to Mr. Bruner, we need to support them as instructors to bridge that gap. Focus on that word gap. All right, let's move to the next slide. So in order to focus on this gap, Mr. Bruno is saying that the scaffolding itself is supposed to be strategic and offers a guide to approach learning tasks and problems. Our students, we give them learning tasks, and then sometimes they aren't able to perform the task because it's a problem with them understanding the concept of what we're trying to deliver. So we need to consider the learner's prior knowledge, if you want to scaffold, and learning preference. And when I talk about learning preference, we have to have a conversation with our students to know how do they prefer. Like right now, for example, classic example, Some students are not, or potential students are not going to enroll in a program because their preference is not online. Their preference is to be in person, to work with an instructor. And that's the honest truth and a fact. So hopefully when things all come back to normal, all right, and we're back in person, that the programs can attract the participants who they weren't able to attract during an online platform or the online service. Scaffolding also is supposed to simplify and organize the information for the student. Focus on that. You're simplifying and you're organizing the information. Next slide. So in the chat, I want you to describe how do students feel when attempting a difficult task without the assistance, direction, or understanding they need to complete it. How do they feel? Yes, anxious, confused, frustrated. So true, I agree. Frustrated and self-conscious, overwhelmed, yes. Correct, they do feel that way. Wonderful, wonderful. And as instructors, as educators, embarrassed, yes. Especially, I agree with all that it makes them more hesitant to participate later on. I think, yes, all of you are correct. And they shut down. But as the instructor, you have that control. So you would, based on the information I'm going to share, you would be able to lessen all those feelings and make them feel comfortable, because at the end of the day, you want buy-in from them. You want them to return the next day for instructions. You want them to remain committed and to persevere. Okay, very good. Next slide, please. So in the chat, tell me, when should you scaffold? For those who have done it, those of you who have done it, when should you scaffold? When should you scaffold? Always, Amy. Yes, yes. Before you teach a new skill, beautiful, yes. Newer, trickier topics, all right. When you are introducing a new topic. Okay, good. Good. Students' responses like the silent stare and no one participates. All right, so you scaffold, right, beautiful. So you all have a very good idea of when you can scaffold. Let's look at the other slide, just to follow up on those points that you have shared. So, oh, press it again, Emily. All right. So when you're teaching a new task with multiple steps, you should continue to scaffold when the students may memorize the steps, but they cannot work independently. The students with learning challenges may not be actively engaged. And I think somebody made a point alluding to that, right? They may not be actively engaged in the learning process and may not understand the learning concepts, okay? So you should also scaffold. For the instructor, you need to observe in order to know when to do it. Somebody said before, somebody said it, you scaffold at any point in time during the lesson, and we'll come to that. So instructors need to observe the students closely. And I want to underscore observe. Some people might say, but how can you observe if you're online? Yes, you can observe. You can observe while you're online. And then no camera is on. Hello. If you demonstrating for them and they're seeing you, but you can't see them, and they tuned in, and you ask them some questions, and based on the response you get, that's a form of, well, you're not seeing in terms of observing, but it can give you a lot of ideas as to what is happening when you scaffold. So you're demonstrating, so you observe the student closely when they are demonstrating the task to see that they are learning or what steps are missed. You might ask them, you give a question, I'll give you an example. You give a question, you give a problem to solve. Let's say it's a math problem, just hypothetical. You did your scaffolding, you demonstrated for them, but a student arrived at an answer. So you ask the student, so tell me, what did you do? What steps did you take to get to this answer? It could be that the students really is confused about what steps and they fumble and they give you an excuse. That's a red flag. That, all right, maybe somewhere along the learning process, they did not understand they understood some things, but not everything. Some things enough to answer, to give you the answer to the question, but they can't tell you what steps they took. So that is a red flag. That is worth noting. All right. So remember that even when students have learned the purpose of the strategy, the scaffolding strategy, is to get them to understand that learning concept so that you can take them to the next level. Okay, Emily, you could go ahead. So let's look at the gaps. Understanding the gaps in learning. Many students come to our class or to the class with gaps in their learning. This gap, there's a terminology for it called zonal proximal development, ZDP for short. And it was coined by a gentleman called Vygotsky in 1978. He believed that teaching should be in that zone. In other words, while I'm speaking, I want you to, if you are a teacher, can picture the class that you're teaching. There's some students you're teaching who they can do it on their own. You guide them, you give them, and they're good to go. They can work alone. Then there's another group of students who need some bit of assistance, but not much. But then there's another group who can't do anything at all by themselves. And these are the students. So these three categories of students you will have in your class. As an instructor, that's the zone that Mr. Vygotsky is talking about. And even for us adults, I'm talking about the students that come to us, but even for us adults, I'm going to say it, there's some things I don't just get, and I have to go to my children to guide me, to help me with the process. And I'm sure it has happened to you as an adult. If it's a new procedure, depending on your organization, some new system they're introducing or so, and you have to learn that system and try to remember the process. I'm telling you, it has happened to me, and I need some hands-on. Don't just show me it in a PowerPoint and expect me to get it. Show me, because it's something that I need to work on every single day. Okay, either put some steps for me to get it, or a checklist, or come on, let's do it together. So that is how some of us learn. And the adults that come to us, some of them are sharp, our students, yeah. Some of them just need a little push, a little extra, and some of them can't do it at all. But we have to focus on all three. So let me also say this here, that the students with learning challenges are often not actively engaged. I think somebody mentioned too that their students may shy away and not be engaged in the learning process. When you're teaching them a new skill, tune into all of that. Tune into all of that. Be open to it. And you have to make them comfortable too. You have to make them comfortable. It's okay. It's a new skill. Don't overwhelm them. Somebody mentioned overwhelm, but you have to be conscious as the instructor that you don't overwhelm them. All right. And of course, the emotions will kick in. What I've observed with adult students too, They might be willing but not able, or able and not willing, whichever way you want to put it. But there are also some students, they make an excuse. You know, we talked about the feelings earlier on that surface. These feelings are so true. But any little challenge that comes their way, they use it as an excuse to back out. And as instructors, as educators, you need to be aware of that. Don't let them cup out so easily. Don't let them cup out so easily. Cajole, encourage. I can give you another example. I remember one time I was in a couple of years ago in a class teaching, and this student, she got all so flustered. Oh, she took up all her books and her bag and about to walk out. So I ran out behind her. I said, what happened? I didn't even know what happened. And she started, this is too much. I don't understand this. Oh my gosh, it's a long time I haven't been in class. And she's so frustrated. I'm feeling it in her. So I turned to her and said, listen, you came here for a reason. Isn't that so? She said, yes, but I really want to, I like learning, but I really want to get my GED. And she's going on and going. So I had to relax her and said, listen, how about if I go at your pace? So you don't have to, you know, I'll put you to work separate. You'll work at your pace. So you wouldn't be so overwhelmed with all that I'm doing. And I'm taking my time. I'm really taking my time. But that time I'm taking wasn't good enough for her. She was so overwhelmed and frustrated. And she agreed. She said, all right. I said, fine, let's go at it again. Because I don't want you to give up so easily. You've given up so many times before. Let's go at it again. And I started working with her at her pace, at her level. And would you believe she was getting it? Did she surprise herself? I said, all I want you to do is to believe in yourself and give yourself some time. So these are the type of students you will get. But some of them, somebody mentioned that they don't talk. That is true. Some students do not talk and tell us anything, especially now where they're online and you're not seeing them. You don't know if they get it, if they don't get it. Hello, make that your prerogative to know that they get it. Even if it means asking them to stay back a few minutes after class and have a conversation with them, even if it means you have to email or text them or so to find out, because at the end of the day, it's a service we're offering, and it's sad to know when a student comes and they're bashful, they don't want to talk, they don't want to say anything, and they just cop out or drop out of the program. So next slide, please. Let's continue. So we're looking at this gap. So let's go back, Emily. I want you all to, should we put them in a group now? In a breakout? Sure, let's go back. Go back to the former slide. Yes. So are we in?
I want to do a breakout.
You want to break out? That'll be good.
Okay.
No, wait, not yet, Emily. Hold on. I have slide 10, right? So we know it's too soon.
Yes, that's what I have.
Yes, so whoever said the breakout, no breakout as yet. Good, go forward, Emily. So we want to understand the gaps in the learning of the student. One, help the learner with the aspect of the task that the learner cannot manage. We will always get, whether it's our strongest student or weakest student, at some point in time, there will be a task that they have, that they have some challenges managing. So you need to help them, okay? Allow the learner to do as much as he or she can without help. Without help, but you're monitoring them. You're monitoring to see what they have done, or what they can do, what they cannot do, where they really need the help. So you're looking closely at the gap. For example, again, you assign homework to your students and they return the homework to you through whatever means, whether it's through whether it's Google Form or Google Classroom, or they text to you or email you the homework. And based on what you see, you can draw some conclusions about whether the student is the challenges, sorry, that the students are having, and what are the gaps. Because of that, what you've seen, you make your assessment, you need to go back either to the entire class, if all of them are more or less on the same level, or you go to the student. You find some way and means to go to the student, have the conversation, believe in the conversation, or you review, you find another approach and strategy to review the lesson. Okay. Yes. Okay. Next slide. This is the fun part, the breakout groups. Now, Emily is going to break you all out into some groups. It will be small groups, but just for about 7 minutes, I want you to chat with your other team members there. How do you fill the gap in student learning? For those who have experienced the students with the gaps in the classroom, how do you begin to fill the learning gap? So you can go ahead and I will check.
Good.
All right, great. So welcome back everyone. I would like, how many groups were there, Emily?
I believe, yeah, 6.
6
And
groups,
one is
really?
still coming back.
All right, great. So what I would like from each, well, besides the group with Sid and Gloria. Hi, Anna. Besides the group with Sid and Gloria, I want a group member from the other 5 groups just to tell me about 1 or 2 gaps that they have discussed or they've seen with their students. Just unmute your mic and just share it with us. What gaps have you noticed? Before I move to the other slide.
Well, I can share.
Yeah, sure. Great. Thank you, Ralph.
Yeah, what I was discussing, with the group there was the challenge of, the gaps when you can have, I don't have this so much personally, but my group members were sharing when you have such different levels. And so
multi-levels.
You really have it, because, you may have some students, along the lines of what you were saying, Yolanda, they get thrown into a group and let's say in a breakout or doing something, and they just don't feel prepared because there's some fundamental gaps that they have. So, one thing we did talk about is, this was sort of my recommendation, certainly with particularly breakout groups on Zoom, not to make that random. You really have to think very consciously about
that is, Ralph, that is the strategic.
Yeah.
That is where you have to be strategic with the tasks.
Yes, absolutely.
And who you're assigned to the task and what task you're assigning to the students.
Exactly.
Very good. Thank you. Thank you so much.
Sure.
All right. Can I hear from someone else? Beautiful. Thank you to your group members. Could someone else from another group just talk about 1 or 2 approaches to filling the gap?
Should I speak for our group?
Oh, great. Hi, Roxanne. Thank you.
So from what I remember, one of the things we talked about, what was the phrase we used, like coming in from the back end?
Yes.
So we were talking about when students write something, you notice where everybody is, and you can sort of pool common errors and address them after the fact, as it were. Although they can always write a second draft, or third draft, so they can actually
right
on these errors.
Right, they can actually write it. So yeah, and somebody I could remember in the early part of our discussion when we started, or when do you scaffold? Somebody said at the beginning, somebody said right through. I agree with all answers. You scaffold right through. But during the intake process, some programs allow their students to do a bit of writing. I don't know if you all are familiar with that in your program. It is important for instructors. I may not be speaking to you because you do it, but I know there are instructors who don't do it. It's important to get that writing, that bit of writing, because it tells a lot about the work you need to put in, and it tells you how much you need to plan, and it tells you about the gap and how you are going to meet with your student, okay? And it also tells you, which is a point I'm going to It tells you how much encouragement and how much affirmation you have to do with them. All right. So I love that point. Very, very good with the writing. Beautiful. Thank you so much to you and your team. Is there anyone else would like to share from their group? Any representative? Just talk about one gap, one approach to closing the gap or to address the gap. No one else? Okay. So let's move on, Emily. Let's turn to the other slide. Thank you so much, Roxanne, and your team. No, not activity. Go back. Right, that's it. Let's talk about filling the gaps. So it depends on what you see surfacing with your students. You might need to use manipulatives. Now, manipulatives, you may not be able to do it online, but if you're in person and you have access to manipulatives in your classroom, fine. I also know that in the classroom, in person, some instructors prepare their manipulatives to work with their students. Modeling. I know ESL instructors, they do that. I observe. They model. You model for your student how to pronounce the word, how to say the word. You model ABEHSL. If you're teaching a particular topic, whether it is finding the main idea or inferencing or an algebra topic, you need to model for your student because you know all of them, or if not all of them, have the gap. Encouragement. I want to slot encouragement in there. Sometimes you'll remember that earlier on I said there are some students who could work independently alone and don't need much help. You can just guide them a little bit. Don't take those students for granted. Like all the other students in your class at the multi-level, all of them need encouragement. So the student who might be strong in class may feel, now they may not have much of a gap, but still you need to encourage that particular student to continue because that student can drop out. I have had experiences before when I worked in a classroom where you have strong students and I feel it in my spirit that, oh my God, once this student continues, this student is going to do well. And something happened. I call it the spirit of dropout. Takes the whole of that student and they stop coming. And then I have to go to the other extreme now with case manager to lobby and work with the student to rejoin. Things happen that will distract them, but you need to encourage them. Somebody mentioned, I think Ralph talk about the levels in the class. We need to encourage our students at different levels to just not give up, encourage them, affirm them. They got it right today, but they may not get it right tomorrow. That's nothing. Still encourage them. We are online now and there are lots of technology. Now I'm going to say this, and I'm being very practical and I'm keeping it real. Yes, our instructors, many of our instructors are working online using the technology to reach our participants. But the truth be told, many of our instructors also do not like the online, they prefer in person. I am speaking the truth. I am not about panicking, fancying it to make it sound good. That's the truth. Because technology comes to with its challenges. For the instructor, especially instructor who is learning it, and remember that the instructor will now be a student and has some gaps in learning technology. So technological resources, some instructors are quite good at it and can manipulate it very well for their students to help them with the learning. But then it might be a bit too overwhelming too for the instructor. But what I would say though, you're using the technology online, don't overwhelm yourself as an instructor. I want you to just keep it simple. Keep one or two resources that you know you use and you're comfortable with it, you use it. And if you know you can help your students that way, continue doing it. Don't overwhelm yourself with trying to get too much, all right? And again, another filling the gap is the one-on-one. one-on-one. Might I also say too that when you do the one-on-one with your students, some of our students prefer it. You may not be able to do the one-on-one, but some programs have volunteer and tutors coming in to assist. You as the instructor or the educator, you just guide the tutor what you need to have covered with this particular student, the one-on-one. So those are some ideas. Oh, okay, no problem. Yeah, so those are some ideas of you use the manipulatives, you use your modeling. Modeling is actually demonstrating and showing them what to do. You encourage them. You use your technology once you can, use what you can with technology. If it's overwhelming for you, don't overwhelm yourself, just use it. But you have to introduce some bit of it. Let's go back a bit. Let me just, I thought I should think of, I just thought of this and I should share it. When we resume and classes are back in person, in terms of technology, I would still encourage instructors to have the even though you're in person, I would still encourage instructors to incorporate or integrate some bit of technology for your students. You're not overwhelming them with it, don't get me wrong. You're doing an in-person class when we resume, but don't throw the technology out of the door, out of the window. Still incorporate one little bit of it, even if it means assigning a quiz to them. That is, it can self-correct. When they submit it, you get the results. Do something, but you have to incorporate it. Okay, so those are just some ideas. Next slide, Stephanie, Emily, sorry, thank you. Okay, good. Other support. The soft support is spontaneous based on the learner. You have students in your class. Those are the stronger ones, I would say. You may not have to do a whole lot for them because from the first modeling or demonstration, they get it, they can run with it. But at times, depending on the task you've given them, they may pause a bit and they may come to you and they would ask for some assistance. There is a little gap, not much of a gap, and you just, it's based on their response. They come to you based on their response. That is the soft support I'm talking about. Then there is the hard support, scaffolding support, which you have, again, like somebody mentioned, when you see that writing, you know, my God, I have a lot of work to do with them. The hard support is anticipated and planned based on the student's difficulty with the task. Gloria was telling me earlier on that in her group, the students can read, they'd have no problem reading, but when it comes to the writing, it's a big burden for them. So she has to find ways of slicing and introducing and integrating writing into her sessions every time they meet. Let me use Sid, for example, who talked about the student who you call on that student to read and then you realize the student has some challenges there. That's hard support. So when you're planning your lesson and planning for your students, whether it's every cycle or how often you get them, they come to you, you always have to bear in mind that you have some hardcore scaffolding to do, hard support planning to do with your students. All right, and these are the students who have difficulty grasping the task. So like Sid said, you know, if that's the case and the reading is a big challenge, he would only give them what he thinks that they can handle. And he can only know that because he has worked with them and he has seen what they have produced. All right. So instructors with this now, both support and hard support, soft support and hard support, instructors should know the students' strengths and their needs when planning the instructions. You should also know what materials should I use. Hello, please don't fit everybody into, don't cut everybody from the same cloth. Not all our students, somebody, I think as Ralph mentioned, the multi-levels, we cannot give a multi-level class the same material to work with. All right, that will frustrate them. They will get confused. They don't want to come back. So look at the materials that you use, what you should use with a particular group of student, and what task you should give them. Mind you, you may be covering the same topic content, right? I don't want to go into another topic, but at the end of the day, you still have to modify it for your learner. Thank you, Emily. Next slide. So types of scaffolding. There are 3 types: the content, the materials that you're using, and the tasks. Okay, and we look at each one right now. Go ahead. The content. Use interesting content or familiar content. Our adult learners come to us with experience. There are some things they know. So we have to use that to build our content when we're delivering our modules and our lessons, okay? For ESL learners, I know it's so many things in the community, banking, family, you know, that you can choose from to build content for your learner. The teacher selects content that is not too difficult, and I'll explain this, or unfamiliar for students in the learning, if you're learning a new skill. Hello, don't shove it to them like that. Take it easy. Build them up, encourage them. And you see that point about giving them something that is not difficult and unfamiliar? You have to win them over. You have to win their self-confidence, let them feel good. And then you can ask, so I want your permission to go on. Could I go on? Oh, yes, yes, yes. Because they feel that they've mastered this skill that is very simple that you've given them, but you whet their appetite so that they want to go to the next level. Okay, so you start very simple and you build them up gradually to where you want to take them. And I'll give another example with your, let's say it's math you're teaching. If you're teaching a math topic, let's say you want to teach introduction to algebra, just call that. But there's a topic called integers that you must teach students. You cannot just teach introduction to algebra without teaching some algebra topics. And if you've taught it before, they know it. They're familiar with it. So you can use that as the basis for building or for growing or moving to the next topic. Okay. Doing so allows your students to focus on the skill being taught and not get bogged down by the content. Hello, I want you to do, let me give you another example. You want to teach main idea. You can probably give them a picture, and that picture could move from a sentence gradually, and then you move from the sentence into what? A paragraph, and then you're gradually moving them there to a more complex, not too complex just yet. What you know they can handle. So, okay, they can read the sentence and they can probably pick up the main idea in that sentence. They can look at the picture, describe the picture, talk about everything that is happening, and they can probably come to you and say, okay, this is what the picture is all about. Good. So you're moving them gradually. Okay. So as I said, you're teaching them the skills, yes, but really you want them to be able to read and discover what is the main idea in a particular context that you're reading. Okay. Word webs, graphic organizers, diagrams that help the students do a better, to better understand a key vocabulary term. I know that there are some instructors who build, I know ESL does it also, the vocabulary words are key. You're talking about family, you want to bring vocabulary words that is related to family. You're talking about banking, you want to talk about shopping, you want to bring words that is familiar. So yes, you bring the words in a diagram form, in whatever format, because you want them feel comfortable, you want them feel familiar with it. So you bring those words, and then after the words, you can slice it into a sentence for them to read, things like that. Whether it's ESL or ABHSC, it's the same thing. Okay. some instructors may probably, for a higher level HSC class, there might be some words there that the students don't know, or with the passage itself, they might discuss the passage. Somebody mentioned before, scaffolding before. Let's do it before. Let's talk about the passage. Let's talk about the words that we're going to see. You bring those vocabulary words for them. And then when you take them to the next level now, is let's read the passage. Let's read it. We discuss what the passage is all about. Let's read for understanding, right? Let's gather some information there. And those same words that you highlighted, vocabulary words, they're going to see those words coming up. It's online now, so some instructors might add a footnote to the words in the passage that they may need their student to know, so that when the student browse over that particular word, they know the meaning of the word. If you're teaching math, there are vocabulary words that students don't know. Hence the reason why students don't like word problems. They prefer the math computation problems, but when it comes to the word problems, they don't like it, because it means reading the words and understanding the words. Estimate. Some simple word that estimate, evaluate. Some words they don't know, so you need to explain and show them and tell them what these words are so you can take them to the next level. All right. So you support the learner to develop their thinking, okay, and manage learning, their planning. When you're managing the learning, you're really planning for them, you're monitoring what they're doing, and you're evaluating them as they're doing it. So during the introduction of your content, you want the learner to think and reflect on the task. Think and reflect on the task, okay? Think about what I have done and what I can do next. These things will be going through their head, especially if you're modeling and you're demonstrating for them. They have to pay attention, and they're trying to, metacognitively, they're trying to figure out, okay, this is what I need to do. So you're preparing them for the next step or the next stage. Hold on, Emily, just now, I'll tell you. Okay. So this content technique here, it is not easy for the students, especially when you have to teach them a new skill or a new strategy. But it helps them to focus exactly on what you want them to what you want them to learn. Okay. Next slide, Emily. Okay. Task. In this type of scaffolding, a teacher begins by specifying the steps in the task. I'm sure all of you have done it. What are the steps in this task or instructional strategy? The instructor then models the step, verbalizing his or her thought process for the students. In other words, the teacher thinks out loud. I'm sure all of you do it. Thinks out loud and talks through. Whether it's math you're teaching, whether it's the reading, whether it's ESL, you're thinking through and you're talking through loud. You're watching at a picture at ESL with a shopping scene or something, you're talking through what you're seeing with your students, okay? And each step he or she is completing, so you're talking through the steps. So once the students are able to understand the steps in the task, because all the tasks that you're giving them, there are steps. They practice the task independently. Like, for example, in ESL, you have listening, speaking, reading, you have the writing, you have to incorporate, but you won't teach all one time. In ESL, you'll do one first, let's listen, all right? Then you want them to repeat what they've listened, what they've heard, turn to the person next, well, in person, you turn to the person next to you and you say what you just heard. But online, it's probably different. They might have to listen to the teacher, or the teacher will use a learning management system where they play, the speech can play back for them, all right? So the teacher observes the students. Again, observation comes in here again as you scaffold. observe the students, the performance, and you coach the students who are experiencing problems. Even though the students have watched their teacher demonstrate the task, they have watched you, they may not yet actually understand how to perform it independently. Okay, next slide. Materials. So you're scaffolding using your materials. Material scaffolding involves the use of written prompts. I'm sure all of you have done that. I think Gloria told me she does it. You have written prompts or cues to help your student perform. And Gloria, this might be a good thing for your group too. This may take the form of a cue sheet or guided examples that list the steps necessary to perform the task. Students can use these as references to reduce confusion and frustration. So you're giving them the cues. Ideally, and I want to underscore this point, ideally, the prompts and the cues should be phased out over time as students master the steps of the task or strategy. So you shouldn't be giving them a prompt all the time. Okay, so all right, let's look at the next slide, please. This is a reading used for building knowledge. What part of the text was difficult to understand? Sentence starters. Gloria, this is for you. I am not sure I understand, and let them fill in the blank if it's possible. Next slide, please. Next slide, Emily. Is it? Yeah. All right. Understand literature. Retell the story in sequential order. Blank, wanted, blank, but, blank. So you're getting them to fill in the blanks. Understanding the literature. Did you do 3 already, Emily, or 2?
I think the second one might have gotten
All right.
passed. I'll go back.
Yeah, 2 go back to me. Word on learning. What word did the author use to describe? The author describes blank and they fill it in. Sentence starters. Okay, let's go on to the 4th one. Materials. Understand informational text. How do the details of the text support the main idea? So this is maybe for a more advanced group or advanced ESL or ABHSC. The main idea is blank. And I know this because, okay. All right. So let's skip through now. Emily, go ahead. All right. So we don't have time for this case study, Emily, but let me read through it, and the parts that are highlighted in red, I want you all to unmute and give me some quick feedback. An ABE instructor discovers the students are experiencing different types of problems with the writing assignment. Many of the students, including Mary, are struggling because they are unable to organize their thoughts. Although they write sentences fairly well, their lack of organization makes their papers choppy and difficult to read. On the other hand, another of her students, Joseph, is experiencing a more basic difficulty. He is unable to identify main ideas for his paper. How could the instructor help all the students with their writing assignments? Now take 2 minutes. Could someone unmute and tell me what is their first approach to handle it? Because I'm pretty sure that you all have experienced students like Mary and Joseph in the class. A quick volunteer.
Maybe for someone like Joseph, and for everybody else too, start by having students brainstorm ideas. And then organize the brainstorm into, big ideas and smaller related ideas. So you kind of start organizing them. And that will get into Mary's problem.
That we'll get into Mary.
Outlining, have them, write an outline.
Okay.
Show them how to write an outline.
Show them, yes, demonstrate, model for them, right? So it means then that I'm picking up in this case here that there are also a couple problems that teacher instructor needs to address in the class. So if it's a problem, Joseph is experiencing it, but maybe other students like Joseph might be experiencing difficulty identifying the main idea. If that is a topic by itself, then the instructor will probably, if not doing it, it depends. As I said, she has to observe her class. So thank you very much for who's sharing there. Yeah, you decide how am I going to approach this? Because this is telling me that most of my students may have different needs. If that's the case, it depends on you may not be able to do it, may not. Some instructors are very good, can do it online. If it's, I'll address both. If it's in person, you could probably group your students who have similar issues like Joseph, especially after you have presented the lesson, the teaching, and then you have students who are struggling like Mary to organize. Or if you want, you can take your time and little by little touch each one. If the first one is organizing, let's focus on activities alone for organizing thoughts so that our students can get it. And then once they've gotten that, then you could move to the next step. All right, let's see if we can identify Joseph. Issue of identifying the main idea. You can deliver a lesson where all of them will be taught how to identify the main idea. There it is now. You might have to bring a different activity for Joseph. Okay, so observing the needs of your students is important in a case like this. And then you have to strategize now which concept or skill you want to teach first. All right, is it to all of them? Or is it to just those who may need it? All right, you may probably teach to everybody and then see how they go, and then you break it down again for those who may need further assistance, further support. All right, thank you. Who was speaking just now? I did not get. I like to call people by their names. All right, so let's move on, Emily. Thank you. All right, error detection. When you're planning your support or your scaffold, the instructor should model the process. We did say that. So you notice a student made an error. Or you need to correct the error, whether it's the math, the reading, or the simple writing in the ESL that you have given them. You have to correct the error so that students will understand what they're doing and they won't get stuck. Our students get stuck and they tell you, Miss, I don't know where I'm stuck, but I can't explain why and how I'm stuck, right? So you have to help them through that by giving them that scaffold support. And you want the students to also learn that it's okay to make mistakes and correct your mistakes. Next slide, please. So in the chat, do you remove the scaffolding from the student? Do you remove the scaffolding? Do you remove the scaffolding? Could you put in your chat for me if you remove the scaffolding? Do you remove the scaffolding? Yeah. Yes, Emily, I got you. Okay. Eventually, maybe. Yes. Once the student is able to do the task. Very good. Yes, correct. You do remove the scaffolding right after the student is able to do the task. If not, you go back and you find another strategy to scaffold. Next slide, please. All right, so yes, we do remove it because eventually you want them, once they've become an independent learner and they could do it on their own, yes. The drawbacks to scaffolding, it's time consuming because you have to plan for each of the learners in their different learning needs. Some people lack sufficient personnel. You don't have much support. It's time consuming, as I said, inadequately modeling the desires. So if you model differently for them, it could be a challenge when they don't get the strategy. To give up control over fading. And when you remove the scaffolding, it is called, next slide, please, Emily. When you remove the scaffolding, it is called fading. All right. All right, next slide, please. The benefits of scaffolding. When assessing the benefits of scaffolding, it is necessary to consider context in which to implement the strategies. Next slide, please. We have here possible early identifier giftedness. So you notice the talent of the student, you can identify that earlier clock. You notice the individual instructions that you have to give. You might have to differentiate the lesson for the different learners at the different levels, and delivers efficiency. It's time consuming, yes, but once you do it right, it helps you to be efficient in terms of implementing the task for your students. Let's go on. So in summary, scaffolding is most useful for teaching new tasks, strategies with multiple steps. Any student at any grade level can benefit from scaffolding. Know the gaps in the student learning, ZDP. Scaffolding can be applied to any subject content, and scaffolding the content, the task, and the materials. Ongoing based on the needs of the student. Yes, it's ongoing. Then fade or remove it as learning goal is achieved. Next slide, please. Okay. All right, next slide, please. All right, so we have to wrap up because you all have your break. And I want to say a special thank you for participating in today's conference, this workshop. I know it was a mouthful, a lot to digest, but in person, you can get to really get into the nitty-gritty of it. So I hope you did take something from the session. Some bit of it you can take and you can apply it. Reflect. As instructors, my advice to you, please reflect. Reflection is key to you being an effective, efficient instructor, especially when you have to plan the scaffolding techniques for your students. So all the best to you. Thank you very much, very, very much. Thank you, Ralph. Blessings to all of you. Keep safe and happy learning. Continue being of good service to your participants. Blessings. Thank you.
Thank you, Yolanda.
You're welcome. Please open the link and complete the evaluation. Yes, Emily, we're following instructions.
Thank you.
It was a pleasure. It was my pleasure. Great. Any questions? You all could probably have a couple seconds. Yeah, and all the best to you with your group for the rest of this fiscal year.